Hard to be definitive, I'm sure, about if this is the actual place where Abraham and his family stayed or stopped. But what we do know from scriptures, from Genesis chapter 12, is that God had spoken to Abraham's family. At that time they were all living together. Terah was his father, and he had 3 sons. Abraham was one of them. And they left the Chaldeans, which was down in Ur, which today is Camp Adder, in that area. And they sojourned all the way up to Haran, which is crossing all the way north through Syria and into southern Turkey, about 300 miles away. And so along the way, they probably followed the Euphrates River. You know, if you and I were making that trip through the desert, what would you follow? You would stick close to the water source. And so, you know, we don't know how far away from the Euphrates he got, but, you know, I don't know how many miles from the Euphrates are we here at Asad. Does anyone know that?
We're not too far.
I don't know. We're not very far, but by foot, quite a ways. And so, but according to the tradition in this area, this is where Abraham perhaps stopped. Could very well have been, because there are very few water sources out here, and I would imagine that the spring was much bigger than this. You know, we're definitely in a time of drought, so over thousands of years it's probably dried up. And then of course then from there God called Abraham and his family from Haran down into the land of Canaan, and where he became the father of many nations. So this area does have great significance, and from a biblical perspective, that all of humanity experiences the blessing of Christ coming to earth, and Christ was a descendant of Abraham. And so I guess I'd like to think that this is at least near the area where Abraham traveled and sojourned.
And is this actually known as Abraham's Well?
Well, I don't think they call it Abraham's Well.
But there it is.
There's
a
no
significance.
reference in Scripture to Abraham's well. Reference to Jacob's well, but that's over in the land of Canaan.
Okay.
But but if you can imagine, though, I mean, these oases popping up in the desert, that, you know, if you're called by faith to sojourn in the desert, to leave comforts and security and water sources, for God to provide water out in the middle of the desert, how refreshing is that? And Jesus later on in the New Testament refers to himself as the spring of living water. And the imagery is this kind of a thing where, you know, when I think of a spring, I'm from Montana, and you're from Oregon, most of you. I think of a spring, I think of a fresh mountain spring. You know, there's water everywhere. But Jesus refers to himself as the spring of living water out in the middle of the desert where there's no life around. And here is life in the midst of the desert. To have this kind of imagery. So this kind of imagery is biblically profound. Unfortunately, it's covered with a little bit of litter.
Yeah.